Those are some interesting popping sounds. I hope it doesn't explode. What you see behind me, hopefully, depending on how the shadows look, is I guess what we'd call an off-grid propane heater. It doesn't require being plugged in, doesn't require batteries, you just have to have a tank and you have to mount it, and that's about it. Of course you have to install it and you have to do it carefully, but it has a nice exhaust system, and it's a good way to get some propane heat into the house and not have to worry about exhaust building up in the house. One of the main reasons that people like to use these is it makes your house more easily insurable. If you can have a heat source as your primary heat source that's not your wood stove. I just got it lit. This is the second time I've tested it out. I want to make sure it's still working. It wasn't the easiest thing to install, but it wasn't as hard as I thought it was going to be. So I picked this thing up down at AC/DC Electric in Homer. Got a little bit of a discount because it was their, floor model or display model or what have you. So it's a warm enough day that I feel like I can install this propane heater that we bought. It's got a piezo igniter. I think it's like 20,000 BTUs or something. So I need to cut a hole in the wall. It comes with this handy template where you can line up that dotted line where the floor is supposed to be, mark your screw holes for where it's going to be supported, and I put my screw holes here. I made sure that one of them here is going to be on a stud. So this hole that I need to cut out, I was able to trace it nicely, and this is where the main vent pipe is going to go through, but this bigger kind of heat shield thing needs to fit through there. So I need to cut that bigger hole, and I have the cutout for it there so that when I make the hole on the outside, it's going to match up. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to drill a hole straight through the middle so that I can go all the way through to the outside and get a center point for this circle out there, so that I know when I cut the hole on the outside it's going to line up because it's going to be based off of the same center point. I'm not going to do it perfectly level because it's supposed to tilt down slightly just in case it needs to shed water out there. So I'm going to find my center point here. Okay. I have found my other side. Now let's go outside and see if it made a hole. So we're under this little overhang here, and if I come down here I can see just the tiniest little hole, and that's what I wanted for making it easy to trace the bigger hole. Centers on that little tiny hole. Learning geometry in high school, I actually liked geometry quite a bit, and I find that I use it all the time. I've got a good, accurate mark on both sides of the wall, so they should match up nicely. So now I can take the template off the wall. I marked my main screw holes. I've marked the main circle. You can see I'd marked a previous circle. I had a different placement in mind earlier, which I have since decided against. So, my next step is going to be to plug this little jigsaw into our inverter and cut a hole. So I gotta go grab an extension cord and turn on the inverter to give me some AC power for this saw. So when I cut holes in walls, I'll usually use a Sawzall if it's just a rough opening I need, then I can kind of fine tune it later with a handsaw. But this, I'm going to use a jigsaw. Alright, that looks like it's going to work out pretty well. Alright, that's probably taking enough insulation out. So, straight on, our hole looks pretty tidy. Might have to tuck a little bit of that back, but I ran the extension cord out through this window into the greenhouse and down through the doggy door to get outside so that we can continue using that saw. Uh-oh. I don't want to have to do this because I don't cut nearly as accurately with a Sawzall as I do with a jigsaw. But I need to finish this hole, so... So I had to charge the camera for a little bit. While it was charging, I cut the rod and this part and this outer part to the length specified in the manual. Yes, I read the manual. Before I continue with that though, I want to silicone around this heat shield because I want to make sure that moisture, even if it's just water vapor, does not get into the wall. Because what can happen is if moisture gets into the wall, and that's why we put vapor barrier on the inside of walls, is that if moisture gets in there during winter, it's trying to travel to the outside. And if it's really cold in the winter, which it often is, that exterior sheathing will be very cold. It'll be frozen. And then that water vapor that is trying to travel out will hit that exterior sheathing and it will freeze into a sheet of ice. And then what will happen is it'll just sit there often for much of winter. And then in spring you hear about people talking about, hey, why is it that like my exterior wall is leaking as things are thawing in spring? Well, that's because all of that water that had frozen to the inside of the exterior wall is now leaking out from beneath that exterior sheathing. So I want to make sure that I seal this nicely. I always like to wear a rubber glove, or I don't know if it's rubber, whatever they call this stuff. This rubber glove when I do silicone work, because it really allows me to use my gloved finger to get really accurate. Make sure that everything is covered the way that it should be. Looks like we need just a little bit more right there. Then of course when I'm done with the outside, I'm going to silicone all around that as well. Probably just about ready to mount this thing, get it up on the wall. So Glenn came over to give a hand. It was a bit of a pain to get that exhaust back on the back there. Things were barely fitting. I had to flare out the metal to get it to fit around everything. We've got it ready to mount. So I'm going to get the screws ready to go. Pick it up and slide it through.
Well, there you go. Now getting it level also. But
Why the level?
Yeah, you have it marked. Oops. Well, get my side in.
Alright,
Don't
can you
crank,
stand up?
don't crank it all.
Is yours still in the hole?
Yep.
Okay. That looks perfectly level, actually.
Okay, so now we gotta get the bottom one done.
That's still in its spot. All right. The spacers are flush with the wall. It's not perfectly level, but it's between the lines.
Hopefully that's not gonna be a major chore. By now.
All right. Well, thank you, Glenn.
I got him back and see what's going on.
Okay. So we got it mounted. Everything looks kind of good back here. It looks like the pipe is connected. It feels solid against the wall. The pipe extends outside the right amount. So tomorrow I'll come back and do some siliconing on the outside. I'll do a little bit of siliconing across the top there. There's a bit of a gap, even though the heat shield pipe is still silicone. I want to, just again make sure that everything is a nice seal. And then we'll have to put a little hole through the wall and bring in a propane line. So we're just about ready to put a hole through the wall to put the pipe through to connect to propane. We've run into a little bit of a problem though, and that is when we go down here and look at where the propane comes in and kind of your standard 1/2-inch propane line, well, it's the wrong size. That's manageable, right? We can adapt. So I adapt. I screw this on there. Alright, so now it's adapted and it will fit, but guess what? This housing makes it so I can't screw this propane line on. So I'm going to take, alright, I'm using my drill here for its light because it's not a particularly bright time of year. So I'm going to take some tin snips and peel that away. But first I got to remove this again. Okay, so I cut it back a little bit and used pliers to flare it out. So let's readapt. Let's be careful of the now sharp metal that is sticking out. But I see that I can now get this on there. Okay, cool. All right, problem solved. So I pre-assembled all this, regulator to the propane line to sediment trap to pipe that's going to go through the wall, just so I could get it all taped ahead of time, make things simple on myself. So it should be able to go through that hole and connect to this tank here. Let's give it a try. Alright, so with that, so before we did it, I did the soapy water test. And the bubbles are coming out of here. This is a brand new propane hose, but apparently it's not holding gas, so I've got to get a new one. There we go. It's not hot yet, but it's running. It's burning. So, yeah. The flame is a-flaming, and the room is slowly heating. I mean, there's not much out of there yet. Now you can't really see the exhaust coming out, but you should be able to hear it. Another nice thing about having a heat source like this is that if we ever wanted to leave for, a day or so, and we don't have to stay home and keep the home fires burning, we could keep this thing running at, a reasonably low level and at least know that the house isn't going to freeze up. And that's something that we have not been able to do for a long time. We have not spent a night away from home this decade. I think, yeah, we hardly ever go anywhere. Those are some interesting popping sounds. I hope it doesn't explode.